Hi. Welcome to Chapter 2, Studying Social Life and Social Research Methods. There's going to be some tips and strategy as a detective or analyst with sociology. So research methods help support, disprove, or modify the claims. There are two types of research. There's quantitative, where you work with data, it lets you do the math, ID patterns. Example would be close-ended questions. We can use the numbers to figure out more things to explore. You can pull out the stats, the graphs, the charts. Think of it this way so you can remember things of quantity. So quantity is quantitative research. Quantity is the amount. An example would be during COVID. They analyzed data such as food deliveries and numbers and amount of people were spending. So how many people were getting food deliveries and the amount that could help to find, did we have an increase in that? And that can help with marketing pieces as well as explaining how many people were deciding to be out during COVID. The other could be an example that they used was how many people got the vaccine and were sick versus those that didn't get the vaccine and ended up getting sick with COVID. So surveys and financial reports and statistics, they are part of quantitative research. Think of it as give me the facts. That's what you want when you're looking at quantitative research. Qualitative research is going to be things like interviews and going to visit places and groups and things. It's what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Create the understanding for someone on the outside so they can understand what it's like looking in when you're doing this kind of research. As I say, dig deep in this one. You're not looking for the numbers. You're looking for some answers in more of a personalized manner. When you're doing it, you can take videos, photos, record sound. With this one versus quantitative was ask closed-end questions, meaning yes or no. With qualitative, think of quality, you're going to ask open-ended questions, more like what brought you to this area. As a detective or an analyst, you're going to investigate the who, the what, the where, the when, and do some comparing as well. We need a training manual to become a detective, otherwise known as our training manual will be called the scientific method. Now, the first part is, number one, what is the problem or issue we will be investigating? What do we need to explore and investigate? Example, does poverty cause violence? That's going to be what we want to know. Number two, before we move forward, it is best to find out if others have researched and developed findings. We don't want to copy their investigation by taking that time to redo what's already been done. So hit the books, do what's called an alternative review. See what's been published, what information is already out there. If you're doing something with poverty, there's certain things out there. But if there's a study, for example, on poverty causing violence in North Carolina, you can actually either look at what year that provided, because things can change from year to year. You can also narrow it down to maybe our county, or change the poverty levels, or redefine violence. Number three, now let's come up with a theory on two relationships. Example, those in poverty are more likely to commit a crime. That's what we're going to say is our theory there. Break out the two key parts that you want to see if they're related or true. So these are the things we're going to see if we can find out. Poverty and violence We're going to call those our variables. Those are our two things. We want to make sure these are very specific definitions so that we can research and observe. So we want to define things in a more clear manner. Define the income range. Are they on assistance? If so, we might want to know how many people are in the household and say they make the household income for the year is $25,000 or less. Or we could say they get financial assistance, or families with children. That's a great way to determine that. You can also determine that if you're looking at income, look at the general income of that area, and they often will have the amount through Department of Social Services for that area. What research method are we going to use? That's number 4. I'm going to elaborate on that in just a few minutes, so keep 4 on hold. But we do want to look at, is it going to be qualitative, quantitative, or is it going to be a mixture of both? Then we're going to start the research. We will collect data. Example data is where we could look into police reports, comparing people's incomes, interviewing the people in the area, observing behavior. So that's going to start being part of the research we would collect in our example. Number 6. Now let's pull it all together and see what we found out. This is going to be number 6. This is the analyzing the data. So you, as a detective, you've gotten all this information, you've started to collect all the details, and you've decided, let me figure out if that initial statement is true, that poverty causes violence. So we pulled it all together, we analyzed it, and now we're going to determine what it means while we're analyzing it. So let's say out of that, we found out that 75% of the people arrested for violence, and we defined violence during it back in number 3. So we're going to go with 75% arrested for violence were in poverty. We found out 25% of those in violence made more money. Observing, after 10 days, people saw, example, yelling. Neighbors expressed fear. So again, that's the yelling, the neighbors, that would be part of your qualitative, where you're going out, you're observing, you're talking to people. In this case, we probably pulled some police reports that shared our detailed information of the violence that met the criteria, and we also pulled the numbers of people in that poverty level. So we used qualitative and quantitative in that area. We certainly could have done one or the other, but we wanted to be, of course, share a broader picture. Lastly, share your findings. It will need to be written, and often it's published in materials, and you go out and do speaking and presentations, and it can be used in the area you serve. Specifically, let's say we're looking at Mecklenburg County, but not just Mecklenburg County, they can use it for the whole state, and actually your sampling may be used nationwide as part of one of the counties or the way that you collected the information. The other thing is, go back and repeat the research. Is there a correlation? Is there an increase? For example, a new sample we're going to use is, with our theory, an increase in gun sales cause violent crime. Or is it, with the other correlate, is it violent crime causes an increase in gun sales? So what is the causation? So a causation is a change in one can cause a change in another. So if we see less gun sales happening, we could say that we would expect the violent crimes to go down. But if we used correlation, That's two or more measures fluctuated together. So if we saw gun sales increasing and violence increasing, that would be the correlation. That does not equal causation. It can help us to be more critical of our findings. You want to be deductive, use the deductive approach. That's when researchers form a hypothesis first. So that was our assumption, was the gun sales cause violent crime to increase, or and then we want to test it to see if it's accurate. So when people make statements, is it really true? And then we test it, and sometimes we're going to find out it's opposite of the assumptions. And we're going to get to some samples of that so you can explore it. But I want you to look at page 39 in the book to get a little bit more idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, I said we would get to the research methods, which was number 4 on our tools list. One way is through ethnography. This is also known as participant observation. These, again, they're not looking for strict numbers. We're looking for qualitative, so which is observation that you could do. You're going to use things such as field notes. So when you're out there observing, it's very important that you write everything you can down, either there when you get back. It's also great to do some recordings there and share stuff. But when you get back, you could talk about the smells you're having. You're listening to certain noises with people. So that's going to be an overt way. When you're just out there, you're observing, you're not one of the people, you're an outsider coming in, and you're trying to find out what's going on. You're not being very specifically, you're not trying to blend in as one of the other people. But I'm sure on some of these detective shows you've heard a convert. Those are the people that are pretending they're part of the people there. It's one of the detectives that's having, they're pretending they're a different identity. If they're one of the homeless people there, or they'll start dressing like them or participating in things, and that way they're getting deeper into the group and finding out a little bit more information. While this is allowed, you have to be very careful with making sure the people that you're with are not in harm by your actions, and you do have to be a little bit careful related to some confidentiality and sharing. So ethnography that we are talking about, this type of research, it does take some time to do both. So if you use it in an example, let's say you're going to visit homeless people at homeless camps, and we're going to look at single homeless moms in this case. So you go to the homeless camp, and if you don't know what a homeless camp is where we have had several in Charlotte, and one was under the bridge, under 277 at one time. It's where people have almost created their little town together of homeless people. They have their tents set up. They sometimes are called tent cities, and they will be around each other and doing other things like cooking there or talking to other people. So it's almost like their own little community of homeless people, or where they've all gathered. So let's say you go there. What do you see? What do you smell? What are you seeing with people engaging with each other? What other ways are you observing? But then let's say you were the convert. Again, you'd be pretending to be one of those women. Not necessarily, you couldn't be a single mom because you don't want to bring kids into that situation, but you could pretend to be one of the people there. So some of the things you're going to need to gain entry, to be trusted, is always great if you have someone that's already part of the group or is trusted there, as one of the examples. If you've never heard of or seen like documentaries on the tunnels of Las Vegas, and in these, you can go underground. Of course, you're going to have to, one, know the dangers for yourself, and also you're going to want to make sure you have information there. Some people are going to be rather scared of video cameras or photography, but again, you always ask in any situation. So if you have a trusted person and you go underground, and there's a large homeless population that lives underground below Las Vegas. So if you're walking on the strip, believe it or not, there's people underneath you. So you can get a lot of information from that. But let's say you go back to your hotel. You're going to want to use autoethnography to record your notes from yourself. So maybe there's things that you were thinking and what you were seeing and observing and your personal experiences there. That's good to take as many notes as possible. And I like to say, when you're taking notes, keep it in their words when you're writing about what they said. Don't adjust it to the way you talk. But when you get back, you can also share some experiences you have down there and some of the things that you personally were dealing with. So a good, factual journal there. A good way to do things with qualitative, remember that we want the details, not the numbers, is interviews. You can ask the women in our example what brought them there. Don't ask them questions like, for example, why are you not happy here? They might be happy at the camp. They might feel safe. So whenever you're asking questions, it's great with that initial question is, what brought you here? Follow-up questions are great with that. You can say, dive in more, but make sure you're not making assumptions. And sharing that with the questions that you have, in this case, you may, at the camps, you may go study 6 out of 20 camps. And that would be a sample. That's a sampling of all the camps you see there, and you've decided before you go in, this is how many I need for my research to be relevant. So you can interview the people there as a group, or you can interview them individually, but always get consent, explain why you are there, and if they are not happy, make sure you step back. They're not to be included in the research if they don't want to be. Also, again, don't try to get the answer you want. If I was going in and saying women in that are moms, they're single in the camps, are fearful while living there, let's not try to get the answer by saying, what makes you afraid in the camp? Again, we have to keep it more open-ended and not get our answer the way we're trying to do. Otherwise, your research is flawed. So don't have those leading questions to what you're trying to get, and don't try to get the answer you want. Also, you don't want to ask double-barreled questions. Don't ask several questions in one sentence without them having the response. That way, otherwise they're going to get confused with the questions and you're not going to get more detailed answers. Next thing you want to do, let's say you've done the interviewing, you've done the observation. Now you're going to see if you can find a pattern in those interviews. And before you put the pattern down, you've already set some guidelines. You're going to want to find out. You can do some codings, for example, how long have they lived there, and are they experiencing concerns. Some of the things you might see when you're starting to go through, you're going to start coding. You're seeing things happening repeatedly. So you're going to see maybe the single moms repeatedly say in their interviews that they've developed connections with other moms and before they felt isolated. So you're going to code that. You want to see if you can pull them directly from your interviews. And that way you'll have coding and you can look at, again, when you're comparing and contrasting. So if you're seeing a lot of people that are saying they feel more comfortable there and their reasoning, let's say because they're more connected to other women, and then you see maybe a population that is saying, I don't feel as comfortable here, and their reasoning is they feel very alone, and they don't get involved with any other people, that could be part of your information. Another options when you're going to find out with research is going to be your questionnaires or your surveys. So it's another one of those quantitative, the numbers only research. So you'll often see these, for example, when you go to a doctor's office. Do you agree? Do you agree strongly? They're going to be yes or no questions. So you may get them on the phone call when people are doing surveys to you. And be careful with any negative questions because that can put people off and they'll go down a negative direction. And you need to make it more neutral. And the one benefit of having this form of quantitative research is that you can get a large group to answer. You can put things digitally out there. You can hand out papers. You could go get as many homeless women as you can by dropping off information. You can do what's known as pulling random names. So let's say I'm going to go to all the women's shelters. We're going to randomly pull all the women there that have children just randomly, and then we're going to set a probability of the survey. As closed questions that you can give yes, no, agree, disagree. And the key to this with your surveys is always test out as a pilot before you take it on completely. That way you can determine, are they going to answer this? Does this information make sense? And it's great to use a pilot with people or situations that are related to it. You don't want it to be simply asking your friend that's also helping with the researcher. So doing a pilot is very important. Okay, so one of the things that we could do is, again, we're at, you definitely want to make a pilot out of it. And now we're going to do a little bit more of, before you take the time and decide on your questions. And think of the order very carefully. Don't don't create the lead in a certain direction. You want to make sure you have it directly where it's comfortable. If you have more of a question of maybe you're having something that's more, do you find that you're more afraid here? Yes, no, whatever. And that's going to cause some questions of, okay, maybe you're bringing in the kids after that. Maybe you should have brought in kids beforehand. It just depends, looking at the order that you need to be at. Also, you want to definitely explore those questions with others. What if 9% of the people don't respond? You sent out the survey, you're not getting the response that you have expected. So what's going to be your next step in that process? If you don't get a certain number, it's a rather low number that you're getting, then you probably need to reevaluate either where you're serving, the type of people you're sampling, the questions that you have. It could be the time of the year or the place. It can be all kinds of things, but you want to go back and redo and evaluate that number so you can get a higher response rate. And some of the things that you might see is, let's say you get 50% response rate. That might seem small, but in the world of surveys, that's actually pretty great. Responses are then taken, and you're going to code those responses. This coding with these responses is going to be a lot simpler than when you had the qualitative, because you have the question and then you have the maybe two answers. You plug 1, 2. And so that's going to be a lot easier, and you can easily calculate, put that into your computer. And example, do they have children, is code in the computer? Yes, no. Let's say you finally get that information out. The result could be 1% of the respondents in the survey reported having children and experiencing domestic violence. So again, you're comparing and contrasting, and you're putting it together in statistical numerical information. So this could say in a theory that you are missing what's and the whys. You don't have that qualitative, but you do have the numbers. So the question is, do you think that research would be stronger if you added the interviews, or does it stand alone by itself? Sometimes the numbers stand alone. If you're looking at child health, some of the health department information, when they're coming up with ideas or when you're doing a grant, you're not going to take the time to do interviews. You're simply going to look at the facts that are out there. So a simple probability would be the larger groups. This could be an example would be a point in time survey for the homeless count. This is actually coming up in January, and they're looking for volunteers. What they do is they go out, first they give out surveys, and it's basically to count how many people are in this shelter, how many are women, how many are men, how many are children, they're simply counting. But they also have other groups that go out and they'll search for homeless people. Maybe they're in parking garages, maybe they're in the park itself, maybe they're in abandoned homes. So you go out and you try to find all the people in that area. So maybe you're doing the west side of Charlotte. That's your job, is to do, 3 blocks there. Maybe that's your group's job. And for some people, they're not only counting, but they're doing the observations, the smells. Some people will actually take that time to ask the questions of what has kept them there out in the area versus being in a shelter. So a lot of times we get great information. I did one many years ago, and we found that there were a lot of people that were out and living on the streets, and we got a count. The most interesting was going in abandoned homes and finding it. And it was a little nervous, but to find out some people chose to live on the streets. They felt more comfortable. There were not strict rules. They sort of were able to go and do what they wanted as they pleased. And others, we found out that shelters can only let you stay there for a certain time period. Some were 4 months, and they just couldn't get off the streets in 4 months on their own. So if you are interested in that, by the way, I'm happy to direct you to where you can volunteer, and you'll do some training there as well. So what has... one of the things, again, is we can use that information, those point in time reports, statistics, the details. We can also use those interviews that you find out there. Those can be used to change policies. They can be used to help write grants. They can help determine what some public services are out there. There's all kinds of things when you get that research. When you find out information, you're going to be able to share that, and you can really help make change simply by sharing your research. It can go on to help other things, and I certainly have used that as well. But when you're doing surveys, it can be a little bit challenging, because one of the problems is people don't always respond honestly, and not all of it is a strong reliability. You can also use some existing resources out there. So some of the existing resources when you're doing research, an example would be, you can go into the North Carolina school system. It's really easy to do, and they have lots of great factual information. It's narrowed down by, you can do overall, you can do counties, you can do school systems. You can, within that, you can do specific schools, public schools, private. So an example that I've had to do before to include in some research is looking at girls, their races, free and reduced lunch. I've had to look at all of that to help combine to create some research. And also end of year testing. They can look at overall scores for that school, or you can get an idea of what population, if they had increased or not. You don't have to interrupt the teachers or the parents or get the school information that way. The data and numerical information is already there. You just have to simply look it up. We don't even have to make phone calls most of the time. And it's very helpful when you're going forward with research. Now, when we'll use an example of comparing and contrasting, you can use some of that research. You can understand the relationships. You can also use it to help you do research from finding out, okay, this area with poverty had this level of maybe end of year scores. Let's go back and maybe look at for 10 years ago. Maybe that's part of your research. 10 years ago, was this area as high in poverty or free and reduced lunch? Were this many kids at this level? And if not, were the end of year grading tests the same or better? Or maybe it's changed back and forth. A way that we could do that is we can look at using experimental methods to explore the impacts. Let's use an example. Does tutoring in areas of poverty increase end of year test scores? That's going to be our question that we have. Remember, number one, we need a question. So let's look at specific area for children in poverty. And so where do they live? What school system are they in? Maybe we may even pick a specific school. And we're going to have two different groups of kids. We're going to just randomly divide them into two groups that specifically met that criteria. We know they all have the same test scores. Maybe they're all lower. Maybe they all have the same poverty level. Okay? And then we're going to put them in those two groups. The experimental group, so group number one, we'll say, we're going to offer them tutoring. They get tutoring for end of year testing, maybe year long, so that they can do better at that. And we're going to have group number two. These are a group of children that are in poverty, and as a control, they're not getting any tutoring. It's the same as it always has, no matter what. So the question is, we have a dependent variable, which is going to be the deciding factor. The dependent variable for this is going to be increased test scores. So we're going to look using that tutoring to see, does it make a change? If so, now we can state tutoring increases the test scores of children in poverty if they have tutoring. So we'll be able to say that for sure. If we didn't see a change, we put that as well. Maybe we can put tutoring does not offer an increase in end of year testing with students in poverty. So the next one is social network analysis. This is measuring the social relationship. This was done a lot through COVID. They use this tool by measuring and visualizing the structure between two or more. I want you to look at page 55. Have you ever heard of 6 Degrees of Separation with Kevin Bacon, the actor? Let me explain. This is sort of the process that people can use. Luke is my son's best friend. Next, of course, I have my son who is connected to me. I have my very close friend Troy who records music in Los Angeles. And one of the musicians he works with is named Max. And Max is good friends with Kevin Bacon. So in this example, Luke would be connected to Kevin Bacon through this whole link. We could look at the same process and doing the mapping. We could look at a study of health and bullying and culture and traditions and how they're connected and what is the process. Example, bullying, how far does it go back and how is it connected? Is it connected specifically to school? Was it part of culture or health related issues for students? We can look backwards and try to map that. So I want you to look at that a little bit more detail. What are some issues that we have in research? So research helps define and decide community planning, policy, services, and grants. They can help with marketing, job selection. If you've ever had them do, you do better with what? Working with groups or working with individuals, agree or disagree or matching those things. That way, sometimes it's used in job selection. It can be used in social media. Those cookies that you keep on clicking that you'll agree to so you can see that web page, that is some of the things that they're using in research. People use it a lot in marketing tools. So again, maybe you're looking up something online and it pops up in your social media. Maybe they use some of those where they send you out a questionnaire to find out what some of your interests are, or they've had some of what are some of your channels you stream online. But in those cases, let's use another example. There's values. So you're going to have that as an issue when you're doing research. Values is the degree of importance you see or think is the right or wrong way of doing things. So this is the way you're looking at things. This is an example. You see someone out in public and they're spanking your child and you're strongly against spanking. Well, you may want to react to it when you're doing your research. Maybe you're down there with the women, single women in the camp, and you see them spanking their kid very hard and the kid's crying. You're strongly against it. When you're doing your research, you suddenly have this value that's going through you that's starting to judge things. You want to see if you can neutralize that. That is one of the things is not to react, but your goal is always to be value free. Now, there are many people out there that think is very hard to be neutral, and I agree. And some researchers actually say it's impossible. But with basic research, you would be the knowledge or knowledge sake. Maybe you want to find out information that out there, maybe you want to study the number of homeless in Mecklenburg County. That could be just because you just want to gather the information. You're not going to publicize it. You're not trying to get it for information out there. You just want to use it like a hobby out there. You just want the details. Applied research can be to put it in action. What is learned? Using the basic research, creating new justification for more programs with homeless. Why are you doing the research? These are the two questions. Are you just doing it just for knowledge sake, or are you doing it so that you can find out the details and see if there can be some action as a result of it? A bias explains who to survey. We're going to decide who we're going to survey. Is it the single women, maybe of a certain race that are in the camp? Are we only going to do single women that have children? You want to, again, be objective or impartial with making decisions without bringing in all of these things. Our research, our experiences of knowledge can make it hard. So it's hard to be objective and impartial when you're creating your findings and your research. You want to be very careful when you're doing it. Again, try to leave yourself out of it, your experiences out of it, and try to just come in neutrally and share your knowledge that you found in the research. Again, it's hard to do. In research, you're dealing with people's lives. I want you always to remember it, because we are studying humans, their behavior. And the key thing when you're studying lives is explain when you're researching. Go ahead and tell them what you're doing. Offer confidentiality. Don't judge. Don't harm. This is part of your research ethics. There's an institutional review board that will look at these safety measures. And if the research looks like there has been some harm, you will not be allowed to complete your research and publish your research. So make sure you're always being neutral as you can, non-judging as you can, be safe, and come in with it with an open mind, and make sure you're being protective of the people that you're working with. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. I look forward to doing some more lessons with you. Always feel free to email me. Remember, 48 hours, give me that time frame to check in with you and reply to your emails. And remember, I have 1 week to grade your materials. But any questions, I encourage them at any time. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you on the next chapters.